"Don't sign that." She said it quietly. Almost too quietly, the way you say something when you're not entirely sure you have the right to say it at all. But Loretta, no, that name was taken. Vivian, no, she wasn't any of those women. Her name was Gloria Osei-Mensah, and she had spent 41 years being the kind of person who noticed things other people didn't bother to look at. She noticed, for instance, that the ink on the third page of the contract had dried differently than the ink on the first two. She noticed that the young attorney who'd slid the folder across the mahogany table hadn't once made eye contact with the man he was supposedly representing. And she noticed, most importantly, that the man at the head of that table, 73 years old, recently widowed, hands trembling slightly from the medication he took every morning with orange juice, was about to sign away the last significant asset his late wife had spent her entire career building. "Excuse me?" The attorney, a man named Whitfield from a firm Gloria had never trusted and never hired, turned to look at her with the particular brand of condescension reserved for people who believe their expensive suits make them immune to being wrong. "I said don't sign that." Gloria set down her coffee cup. Not yet. The room went very still. Let's go back 2 days. Gloria Osei-Mensah was not supposed to be at that table. She was supposed to be in Charleston, attending a fundraiser for a children's literacy program she'd co-founded 6 years ago. She had a hotel reservation. She had a navy dress hanging on the back of a bathroom door 3 states away. She had, in the ordinary course of events, absolutely no reason to be sitting in the conference room of Whitfield, Park and Crane on a Tuesday afternoon in November. But her phone had rung on Sunday evening. It was Harlan. Not Harlan from the names list, a different Harlan, though perhaps the name doesn't matter as much as the voice. The voice was thin, frayed. The voice of a man who had buried his wife of 47 years 8 weeks ago and hadn't yet figured out how to exist in the silence that came after. "They want me to come in," he said. "The attorneys. Something about the estate restructuring. They said it's routine." Gloria was sitting on her back porch, watching the last light leave the sky over the lake she'd lived beside for 11 years. She had a glass of wine in her hand that she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. "Which attorneys?" she asked. He told her. She set the wine down. Whitfield, Park and Crane had been circling Harlan Beaumont since before his wife Cecilia was in the ground. Gloria knew this because she knew Harlan had known him for 30 years through the network of black professionals in Atlanta who had all, at various times, helped each other navigate a world that didn't always make space for them at the tables that mattered. Harlan had built a modest empire in commercial real estate. Cecilia had been the one to hold it together, had been the architect of its growth, the person who read every contract twice and still called her attorney before signing anything. With Cecilia gone, Harlan was a 73-year-old man with trembling hands and a grief so fresh it changed the way he moved through a room. And Whitfield, Park and Crane had called him in for a routine consultation. Nothing about that was routine. "What time Tuesday?" Gloria asked. 2 o'clock. I'll be there." He started to protest. She let him finish, and then she said, "Harlan, I'll be there." She called Charleston and rescheduled. There is a particular kind of person who believes that wealth, once accumulated, insulates you from being taken advantage of. This is one of the great comfortable lies that money tells itself. The truth is nearly the opposite. The more you have, the more elaborate the mechanisms designed to separate you from it. And the more recently you've lost someone who understood those mechanisms, the more exposed you become. Gloria understood this because she had spent the better part of 2 decades as a forensic accountant, specializing in estate disputes. She had seen it all, the rushed timelines, the documents prepared before a death certificate was even filed, the attorneys who specialized in what she privately called grief capture. She had testified in 17 cases. She had never lost one. She was not currently practicing. She had, as of 3 years ago, retired to a life of consulting only when something truly warranted her attention, board memberships at 2 nonprofits, and the Lakeview she'd earned. Harlan Beaumont warranted her attention. She arrived at the firm 15 minutes early, which she always did when she wanted to observe. The receptionist, a young woman whose professional warmth had a mechanical quality, offered her water and then tea, and then, when Gloria declined both, seemed briefly uncertain what to do with herself. The waiting area was designed to impress, the kind of design that communicates wealth through scale, through the particular heaviness of furniture, through the deliberate absence of anything warm or personal. When Harlan arrived, he looked smaller than she remembered. Grief does that sometimes. It takes something structural out of a person and leaves them inhabiting themselves differently. He saw her and stopped walking. "You came," he said, as though he hadn't quite believed she would. "I told you I would." He sat down beside her. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Cecilia would have already found 17 things wrong before we walked through the door. "I know," Gloria said. "I'm working on it." That almost made him smile. Whitfield himself led the meeting. He was younger than she expected, early 50s, with the smooth, confident manner of a man who had never been seriously questioned in a professional setting. He introduced himself, shook hands with Harlan, nodded at Gloria with the air of someone acknowledging an unexpected piece of furniture. "Miss Osei-Mensah," he said. "You're here in what capacity?" "Friend of the family," Gloria said, pleasantly. "This is a confidential legal proceeding, and I have Mr. Beaumont's full permission to be present, don't I, Harlan?" "You do," Harlan said. Whitfield's smile didn't move. He sat down, opened his folder, and began. The language of the documents was precisely what she expected, dense, confident, written in the specific dialect of legal prose designed to make the person reading it feel that full comprehension is optional, because surely the professionals have handled everything. There were references to restructuring, to liability protection, to tax optimization, to ensuring continuity of estate assets. All of it sounded reasonable. All of it was true, technically. The way something can be technically true while being functionally a mechanism for transferring control of a $62 million portfolio to a holding company in which a third party held significant interest. She found it on page 3. It wasn't even hidden particularly well. A sentence about administrative rights vested in a managing entity with a reference number that corresponded to an exhibit at the back of the document. The exhibit, if you read it, and most people wouldn't, most people would have stopped at administrative rights and assumed it was boilerplate. The exhibit transferred operational authority over the Beaumont Family Trust to a company called Crestview Asset Management LLC. She had never heard of Crestview Asset Management LLC. That meant nothing in itself. She hadn't heard of every company, but she noted it. She noted the way Whitfield's associate, a young man with a practiced blank expression, watched his senior partner rather than Harlan. She noted that the documents had been prepared with a date 3 days after Cecilia's death. She noted that nowhere in the cover materials was there any indication that a second attorney had reviewed this on Harlan's behalf. Harlan picked up the pen. "Don't sign that." The silence in that room had its own texture. It was the silence of men who have decided a transaction is complete, being informed that it is not. It was the silence of carefully laid plans, encountering an unexpected variable. Whitfield recovered first. He was good at recovering. "Mrs. Osei-Mensah, I appreciate your concern, but these documents have been prepared by our firm according to the highest." "Who is Crestview Asset Management?" A pause. Brief. Anyone who wasn't watching for it wouldn't have noticed it. But Gloria had spent 20 years watching for pauses. "It's an estate management vehicle." "For whom?" "Established to provide continuity of—" "For whom, Mr. Whitfield?" Another pause. This one longer. Harlan looked between them the way a man looks when he realizes a conversation has been happening in a language he didn't know existed. "What's Crestview?" he asked, and that was when Whitfield's associate made a mistake. He looked at his phone. Just briefly. A flick of the eyes, a fraction of a second. But in that glance was everything. The waiting message, the party who needed to know how this was going, the thread connecting this room to something outside it. Gloria looked at Harlan. "Do not sign anything today. I need 3 days. Ms. Osei-Mensah." "Mr. Whitfield." She stood. She was not a tall woman, but she had the quality, when she chose to deploy it, of taking up exactly as much space as the moment required. "Your client arrived here 8 weeks after burying his wife, without independent counsel, to sign documents that would transfer administrative control of his family trust to an entity he cannot identify that your firm prepared 3 days after his wife's death. She picked up the document and looked at him directly. You will give Mr. Beaumont the time to have independent legal review of these materials. And if you have any concern about whether that is a reasonable request, I am happy to discuss it with the Georgia State Bar. No one moved. Harlan put the pen down. 3 days is a short time to trace a holding company back through the layers of legal architecture designed to make tracing difficult. Gloria did not do it alone. She called a man named Desmond Achebe Cross. Again, not a name from the list, a name she'd invented for this story, the way stories invent the people they need. A forensic attorney she'd worked alongside in 3 estate fraud cases. She called a woman named Vivian, who ran a due diligence firm out of Charlotte and who owed Gloria a favor of the kind that doesn't expire. What they found in pieces, the way you always find these things. A thread here, a document there, an incorporation record in Delaware, a second one in Wyoming, a third entity whose registered agent was a name that appeared in multiple LLCs connected to a man named Parker Wren, not from the list, though perhaps the name sounds familiar in the way that names of certain kinds of men always do. Parker Wren was 44 years old. He had met Harlan's eldest son, Marcus. No, Marcus was on the list. His son's name was Damon. Damon Beaumont had met Parker Wren 14 months ago at a real estate investment conference in Miami. They had, according to Damon's own LinkedIn, stayed in touch. They had, according to records, Gloria would later examine in a deposition she never thought she'd be giving, entered into a consulting agreement 5 months ago, 2 months before Cecilia died. This part is important, not because it tells you what Damon knew or when he knew it. That would be determined by other people in other rooms, but because it tells you something about the anatomy of these situations. They almost never begin as crimes. They begin as opportunities. A son who loved his father but understood his father's business less than his mother had. A financial advisor with access to a grieving family's trust network. A held open door, a conversation that started plausibly and moved in one direction, incrementally, until you look up and realize you're somewhere you didn't mean to go. Or sometimes they do mean to go there. Sometimes it's simpler than that. Gloria did not decide which of those was true. She gathered what she found, and she presented it to Harlan on the 3rd day at his kitchen table in the house where he and Cecilia had lived for 31 years. The photographs were still on the wall. The coffee was stronger than it needed to be. She laid out the documents. She walked him through each one. She did not rush. She did not soften it. When she finished, Harlan was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, a cardinal landed on the feeders Cecilia had hung the year before. Damon, he said finally, not as a question, as something he was saying aloud for the first time to hear how it sounded. I don't know what Damon knew, Gloria said carefully. What I know is that the structure was designed to benefit Wren's entities significantly. What Damon understood about that structure is something you'd need to talk to him about. He's my son. I know he is. She trusted him. Cecilia trusted him. There was nothing to say to that, so she didn't say anything. She let it sit in the room. Grief had already been sitting there. After a long time, Harlan reached across the table and put his hand over her folder. What do I do? You call an attorney of your choosing, not Whitfield, not anyone connected to that firm. You send these documents to them. You do not contact Wren or anyone associated with him, and you have a conversation with your son that I cannot have for you. He nodded slowly. And the trust, he asked, Cecilia's work, everything she built, is still yours, Gloria said. You haven't signed anything. He closed his eyes. What happened next took longer than 3 days. The Georgia State Bar received a formal complaint. Whitfield, Park & Crane placed Whitfield on administrative leave pending investigation. Crestview Asset Management LLC turned out to have been structured in a manner that attracted the attention of the SEC, and Parker Wren, whose consulting business had, it emerged, done this before in other cities with other recently bereaved families, found himself in conversations with federal investigators that he had not anticipated having. Damon Beaumont cooperated. Whether that speaks to his character or his legal strategy, was not Gloria's determination to make, and she tried, genuinely, not to make it. What she knew was that Harlan met with his son twice in the weeks that followed, and that after the second meeting Harlan called her and said, in a voice that was quieter than she'd ever heard it, "I think he didn't know all of it. I think he just didn't ask enough questions." "That happens," she said. Cecilia would have asked every question. "Yes," Gloria said. She would have. A pause, and then, for the first time since August, Harlan laughed, just briefly, a small, real sound. You know what she would have done if she'd been in that room when you said, "Don't sign that"? What? She would have stood up and started clapping. Gloria sat with that for a moment. Through her window, the lake reflected a sky going orange and pink, the way it did in November when the weather couldn't make up its mind. "Go eat dinner, Harlan," she said. "Actual food, not whatever you've been calling dinner for the last 3 months." He told her he'd been eating fine. She told him she didn't believe him. He laughed again, and this time it lasted a little longer. She did not go to the fundraiser in Charleston. She rescheduled twice and then finally made it in January, 4 months late, in a dress she'd bought to replace the navy one she'd decided she was tired of. Someone at the event, a young woman maybe 30, working in estate planning at a mid-sized firm, came up to her during the cocktail hour and said she'd heard about the Beaumont situation. Word travels in those circles. It always does. "How did you know?" the young woman asked. "How did you know something was wrong before you'd even read the documents?" Gloria thought about it honestly, the way she tried to think about most things. "The attorney didn't look at his client," she said, "not once. And when you're genuinely representing someone, you look at them, you check on them, because your job is to protect them, and protection requires attention." The young woman nodded slowly, writing something in her mental notebook. "And the ink," Gloria added. "Page 3 dried different than the others. Someone had gone back in. What did you do with that?" "Nothing yet. I just noted it. That's usually how it starts. You notice something small and you don't dismiss it just because you can't explain it yet." She paused. "Most people get taken advantage of, not because no one noticed, but because the person who noticed decided it wasn't their place to say something." The young woman looked at her for a moment. "Is it always your place?" Gloria picked up her glass. "It was that day," she said simply. "So I said something." Harlan Beaumont did not lose the Beaumont family trust. He restructured it, slowly, carefully, with attorneys he selected himself and had vetted by Gloria before he signed a single page. It took 8 months. It was not glamorous. There were no dramatic courtroom moments, no scenes of public reckoning. What there was, a $62 million portfolio that remained intact. A family that had, if not fully healed, at least begun the work of honesty. And an empty feeder, which Harlan refilled with sunflower seeds in the early spring, because he couldn't look at it being empty anymore. He called Gloria when the first cardinal came back. She was on her porch when her phone rang, watching the light change on the lake, the way she always was in the evening. "It came back," he said. "I know," she said, though she didn't, not really. "But some things you say because they're the right thing to say, and because the person on the other end of the line needs to hear that the world, despite everything, still holds a few things in place." The cardinals stayed on the feeder for a long time. Neither of them said anything else. That was enough.